All right, so we're going to begin now. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this discussion about the new Title IX regulations with SAFER and the Office of Equal Opportunity. We appreciate you all being here so much. Before we begin, at Cal Poly, we acknowledge that the land on which our university sits carries the heritage and unbroken culture of the indigenous people of San Luis Obispo County and region, the Yaktichu Tichu Yaktilhini Northern Chumash tribe. We would also like to acknowledge the stressful time that we all are living in with not only the pandemic, but with the racial injustices that occur and continue to occur in our country, the elections coming up and the overall political moment we live in, and everything else we are facing during this time. This webinar about the new Title IX federal regulations is intended to be a caring and supportive community conversation, and it's not meant to be a polarizing discussion. This is an opportunity to build understanding and bridges to support as we discuss how these new regulations affect Cal Poly students and what these mean for everyone. That being said, my name is Sonia Koss. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a fourth-year history major who's serving as the ASI Secretary of Health for this academic school year, and I'm also the moderator for this event. If you have any questions for the panelists, please ask them in the Q&A function of the webinar, since the chat feature has been disabled. The webinar will also be recorded and posted on various platforms after the event if you'd like to share it with others or review any of the information we talk about here tonight. And with all of that, I'll pass it off to our amazing panelists from both SAFER and the Office of Equal Opportunity for some introductions.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Blakey. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Assistant Director of the Office of Equal Opportunity and a Title IX investigator.
Hi, my name is Gillian Cutshaw. I'm one of the two campus advocates with SAFER. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm very excited to talk to y'all tonight.
Hi, my name is Sarandon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a fourth-year political science student, and I'm the SAFER Prevention Education team lead for this year. And I'm just happy to be a part of this and getting to offer a student perspective to this, these new regulations.
Yeah, now we'll just go into some introductions on both SAFER and the Office of Equal Opportunity and what they do as departments and how they serve Cal Poly students.
So I'll go ahead and jump into what is Title IX and what that looks like at Cal Poly. Title IX is a part of a federal statute that prohibits discrimination based on sex in higher education. The actual language of the law, it's super short. It's just one sentence, and it says, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So you might notice in that sentence that there's nothing in there that says anything specific about sexual assault or dating violence or stalking or anything like that. But over time, since the 1970s, when Title IX first came into play, our interpretation as a society about what exactly constitutes discrimination based on sex has expanded. And specifically under the Obama administration, the Department of Education advised that sexual violence on campus actually is an extremely severe form of sex-based discrimination. So that's how things like sexual assault, stalking, dating violence, that's how all of those get under the umbrella of Title IX and Title IX compliance. So Title IX is housed, the Title IX department lives in the Office of Equal Opportunity, which is Cal Poly's office authorized through the CSU system to address potential executive order policy violations involving gender and power-based violence. So y'all know that Cal Poly is part of a 23 campus system, and the chancellor's office down in Long Beach is kind of the hub, is the place where the executive orders are drafted and written. So a few things to note about Title IX. Title IX exists to ensure equitable access to education for students of all genders. We provide investigations into complaints of sexual misconduct, dating or domestic violence, sexual harassment, and stalking. And we're a neutral third-party factor. fact finder. So that means we're not on either party's side. And finally, we exist also to connect students with resources and accommodations outside of the services that we can offer. So that's where we partner with folks like Safer. We have a really good working relationship with them, and counseling services on our campus. So that's just a 30,000 foot view of Title IX and what it looks like at Cal Poly.
Okay, so I'll chime in a little bit about Safer's role in the process. So I am a confidential advocate, and we have another confidential advocate named Sarah Wilson. The two of us are available for students to talk with, seek support, get resources, at pretty much regular business hours, and we're available virtually all of the quarters that we're going to be virtual. So you can still contact us even if we aren't on campus. When students want to meet with us and talk about their options about Title IX or reporting to law enforcement, we're very well versed in what that looks like, and we help students to understand the process, to know what to expect, and to have their options available to them. We can also accompany students virtually to meetings with Title IX so that they have a support person with them during that time. And then we can also participate with the student in the investigation and the hearing process. So in terms of the investigation, that might look like helping a student to write a statement or come up with a timeline or put their evidence together. It might look like actually participating in the hearing as a support person, even though during that time the advocate would be silent during the actual hearing itself. They're able to meet with the survivor during the breaks and just provide them emotional support and help them to get through that challenging experience. So we're available to do all of those things, and really just to provide whatever support a student is looking for. Also, we are able to talk with students about their options without filing a formal complaint on their behalf. So we're not mandated reporters, just to clarify a little bit more there. The counseling center staff and Safer advocates are the only folks on campus that are not mandated reporters. So we're a really good place to start for folks if they're just kind of exploring and wanting to know a little bit more about what the process would look like. So I think I'm gonna pass it to Sarandon to talk with you all a little bit more about the student perspective.
Yeah, so Safer has two parts to it, and Jillian and Sarah take care of the wonderful crisis counseling and advocacy. We're so grateful for them on our campus. And then I am under like our events and outreach. So I do prevention education around gender and power-based violence. And so part of that involves understanding a lot lower level of understanding about how Title IX works. Also how to educate our student body and our community members on how to react when people disclose, share with our community what resources are available, what those resources look like, and how to help people get in contact with those. So as a student, I do a lot less because I'm a student and I do my school on top of this, but I have the ability to do a lot of peer-to-peer education and meet with different student groups. So I'm able to touch a lot of different areas on this campus along with my prevention education team.
All right, thank you all so much for that. We are now going to move into the question and answer phase of our event. These questions have been compiled from student responses, but if you have any additional questions, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A chat box, and we will hopefully have time to answer them at the end. All right, so we also have the questions here on the screen. We'll leave them up for about 10 or so seconds after I read off the questions, just so that we can see all of our panelists. But our first question is, who mandates Cal Poly's processes? How has the CSU implemented the new regulations?
Great, thank you. I can go ahead and answer that. So as I stated a moment ago, and as I'm sure you all know, Cal Poly is part of a 23 campus system, the Cal State system. And so the chancellor's office is where those executive orders are drafted, and those executive orders govern our policies and procedures. So the same executive order that applies to Cal Poly applies to CSU Dominguez Hills, San Diego State, like SFSU, that is so hard for me to say. The same executive order applies to all 23 campuses, and they are born from the Chancellor's Office down in Long Beach. The Chancellor's Office is also responsible for being in compliance with state and federal law, and so that includes, of course, Title IX. So the new regulations went into effect on August 14th, 2020. Already crazy year. They decided to make it even crazier. And so California actually joined in several other states in filing for an injunction. And without getting too legal here, basically the point of me telling y'all that is I just want you to know that California and several other states filed for this injunction, which was an attempt to delay the implementation of the new regs based on a challenge to their legality. But the injunction was denied. Thus, the CSU has implemented the new rules, but remains committed to supporting students in every way possible while the new regs will continue to be challenged in court. And that will take months and months and months, but basically we must comply. So that is how they've been implemented for us.
I'm just going to add a tiny bit on when Caitlin just said we must comply, just to clarify that a little bit more. So because we're a federally funded institution, we have to follow the regulations that are set by the Department of Education. So that's just not an option to not do that. If we chose not to do it, we would lose our federal funding, which we cannot do. So just when she says we have to comply, that's a little bit more about why exactly and what that means.
Thanks, Killian.
Thank you both. All right, so now we're going to go into our second question. So, what do the new regulations really mean? What are the most significant things to be aware of regarding the new regulation?
How much time do you have? Just kidding. So the new regulations total over 2,000 pages. It's a lot of information, and so I will reduce it down for you so you don't have to read 2,000 pages and give you the key, what I consider to be, and what for our culture, our community at Cal Poly, what it means for us. There are a few key takeaways. So the very first one is the definition of sexual harassment looks a little bit different now. Used to be that conduct needed to be so severe, pervasive, or objectively offensive to rise to the level of, qualifying as sexual harassment. And now the definition looks like this. The conduct needs to be so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. So one small word makes a huge difference there. So that's a really, really big change to the definition of sexual harassment. Another huge change, or what I consider to be a huge change, is now live hearings are required with cross-examination. Now, before we all freak out at the words cross-examination, I need you to understand that this doesn't mean cross-examination by an attorney. It only means cross-examination by a hearing officer who's a third-party neutral. And so I think that what kind of pops into our minds when we hear cross-examination looks, there's a million different ways that could look, but for our purposes, it's going to look like a third-party neutral fact finder, asking the parties questions that are submitted by the other party. So I hope that makes sense. Live hearings with cross-examination. Another pretty big difference here is that universities are now only obligated to investigate instances of potential sexual violence that occur on campus or through a campus program or activity. With a little asterisk there for study abroad. So if something occurs in Greece or France or abroad through a Cal Poly program activity, we still have jurisdiction. But if two students, let's say hypothetically, go down to Santa Barbara for the weekend, unrelated to any Cal Poly program activity, that's going to be a loss of jurisdiction for us. for Title IX purposes. I hope that that makes sense. Those are key takeaways. That's 2,000 pages still for you there. And please jump in if I left anything major out.
Well, I want to add, I think one of the concerns that a lot of folks have about the new regs is that they think that the institution is going to investigate fewer instances of assault, or that they are going to ignore reports because they didn't happen on campus or in a campus owned space or a campus sponsored event. Essentially this fear that the changes have made it so that the university is able to ignore things that have happened that are against the policy. And I really want to clarify that with y'all, because the thing is that that is not true. We still have a policy in place that says that any type of sexual misconduct is a violation, and that folks that are found responsible for that are going to have sanctioning. So even if something happens outside of campus but still involves 2 Cal Poly students, or happens in a place that's not identified as jurisdictional under the new regs, it still falls under the previous policy, the policy that we've always had in place about sexual misconduct. So that can still be investigated, and it should still be reported if someone wants to report it. So if a survivor experiences some type of sexual assault, harassment, exploitation, stalking, domestic dating violence, and they want to report that to Title IX, they absolutely still can. And it still can be investigated, just under a slightly different process. So the hearing might look a little bit different than the one that Caitlin described, or it might go through a different model called a single investigator model and not actually have a hearing, but it can still be investigated. So please don't think that as a result of these changes that suddenly a whole lot of things are not going to be against policy, or a whole lot of things are not going to be investigated. So that's not the case. So I hope I'm making that pretty clear. But I think that's a really important takeaway from the new regulations, is that yes, there are changes, and we're still going to be making sure that students who want to report are able to do that, and that then the university is still investigating instances of this type of misconduct.
Okay, thank you both so much. So now we're going to go into our next question. So, what can we do to support survivors / what does it look like to engage in this conversation on campus? Who is here to support me?
Sarandon, do you want to start with the first part of the question, and then I'll jump in?
Yeah, sure. So supporting survivors and engaging in this conversation on campus can look very different. It can happen in multiple different tiers of engagement. You can make the statement like, I believe survivors, I believe people who report or who disclose. You can take steps looking on the Safer website and understanding how to respond to someone who discloses to you. Knowing your resources is helpful with supporting survivors. Also, you can schedule presentations for a club or a student group with Safer. You can follow Safer on social media. That's a really easy way to engage in this conversation. We post a lot of really great information. If you feel comfortable and want to take a further step, since a lot of our lives are virtual these days, you can repost our information that we have on our social media. Also, a big part of this is participating in pro-social behaviors. So that's being empathetic to people in our community. I believe you when you say this. I'm not just here to sympathize with you, but I'm here to empathize with you. I want to feel how you're feeling and help you through this process. Also, holding our communities accountable. If we see something we don't like in our peer group, in our Cal Poly community in San Luis Obispo, stepping up and saying, I'm not okay with this. This is not how I want my community to be viewed, and this isn't how we should be acting in our community. Also engaging with peers who want to have this conversation. A lot of people are really ready to have this conversation, and if you don't feel comfortable bringing it up with your peers, you can always reach out to people who are ready to have these conversations by scheduling a presentation or bringing it up at a club meeting. So it can be as little as, making that statement, I believe survivors, following us on social media, or it can be like as much as enrolling in safer leadership training next quarter, which is like a 21-hour training where you get to have a lot of these conversations and how to support survivors, how to be more knowledgeable about these topics.
And I'll jump in about who's here to support me. So I know that we have already touched a little bit on this, but Safer Advocates are here. We absolutely are here to support folks through the investigation process, folks who are considering it or folks who are absolutely wanting to report. As well, we support folks through law enforcement reporting processes too. Beyond Safer, there is also RISE, which is a nonprofit rape crisis center here in San Luis Obispo. RISE is our 24-hour hotline. They're the folks that we refer students to for after hours support. And they are a tremendously wonderful group of folks that just provide great support. So if people aren't comfortable for whatever reason coming to Safer, or they're just not really sure about it, RISE is a wonderful resource. And so those are really like the big two things as well. I guess I would also throw the counseling center in there too, because they do provide ongoing treatment. And they provide group counseling, individual counseling, all of that wonderful stuff. So there's a lot of ability to get support, and it's really not something that you should face by yourself. I also want to just point out as well, it's really clear in the way that Title IX is organized and designed that complainants, so the people who are making the complaint, and respondents, so those are the folks that the complaint is made against, that both of them are entitled to equal support. So even though Safer exists to support the students who are doing the reporting, the complainants, the respondents are entitled to support as well. And they're entitled to a hearing advisor, which can be anybody that they choose, but also the university has a list of folks who are trained as hearing advisors that they provide to both parties. And they're entitled to having a support person as well in their hearing, and that can be anybody that they would like it to be. Oftentimes we connect respondents or people who might be concerned about a friend who is a respondent or anything like that. We connect them often to the Men and Masculinities program. And Nick Billich is the person who runs that program on campus. But really wanting to put it out there that support exists and that Safer is here. So please, if you have any questions, anything that you want to know more about, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
All right, thank you both. So now we're going to go into our next question. Are there any ways in which the changes might increase re-traumatization of victims, and what can we do to mitigate this?
Sarandon, do you want to jump in first on this one too?
Yeah, sure. So I think especially since these regulations are new, this conversation's happening a lot. It might be happening in your classes or in your meetings. It also might be just happening on social media, and a lot of things lack content warnings these days. So I think it's really important to, before having this conversation, before bringing it up, asking someone like, do you feel comfortable having this conversation? Do you want to have this conversation with me? Because we often forget to check in with people and see where they're at. And I think that could really help mitigate that re-traumatization that can occur when all of these things are happening. Also, if someone has gone through an experience like this or has gone through a Title IX process, this might be bringing up those feelings again. So, like I said, just checking in with people is really, really important. How are you doing? Is there anything you want to talk about? And back to knowing your resources, because we can't expect everyone to be a counselor, and not everyone knows all the answers, but you can know the resources and how to help put people in contact with resources. Like I said earlier, also posting things on your social media, like I support survivors, and letting people know, like, I'm a safe person to talk to. Like, if you need to talk through something, I can help you find the resources to do that. And so if they are feeling like, oh, all these changes are happening because society might be changing, you can let them know, like, I'm still here for you, and that can really help in the process.
Thank you. I think it's also a little bit that maybe is more frightening for folks is the live hearing and the cross-examination. I think that part probably feels maybe the most intense or the most intimidating. And just knowing again that Safer is available to be an advocate and a support person in a hearing. and really throughout the whole process, so that nobody has to go through it alone. Also, I'm not sure if we have a whole bunch of time, but maybe Caitlin can talk about as well that um, if someone reports to Title IX, there's other options beyond just a hearing. There's also an early resolution agreement that someone can choose to try to work with. If they're the complainant, they can try to see if the respondent will accept that, and so they can avoid having to go to a hearing. If the idea of a cross-examination or a live hearing is too frightening or too upsetting or too traumatizing, that is another possibility that's out there. Yeah, Caitlin, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Basically, we're now getting into like informal resolution agreements, right, or early resolution agreements. And I was planning to talk about that a little bit later, if that's okay. But I think to your point, the most important thing is that there are avenues. There are avenues to go through a Title IX process without being subject to cross-examination. And although these changes are new and we're all, the chancellor's office is figuring it out, like we're implementing it and doing the best that we can to comply. At the top of our list of priorities is making sure folks, students know what their rights are and what their options are. And to the extent that we can provide, a variety of options, I think that's a positive thing.
Thanks, everyone. All right, so question number 5 is, how can members of the community help support survivors going through the grueling process of Title IX?
So I feel like we've touched quite a bit on what SAFER can do. And Sarandon, I know, is talking a little bit about what friends can do and support folks. I think it's just, if you know somebody in your life that's going through this, let them know that you're there, that you can listen without judgment, you can help empathize, and that they have some options and some choices around things like getting accommodations for academics or housing, that there are different things in place beyond simply there is an investigation and SAFER as a support. There's also possibilities for getting help with whatever academic accommodations are going to allow them to succeed. There's possibilities of moving residence halls if someone lives on campus, things along those lines. So you can mention that as a support person, like, hey, if you're struggling with this, have you talked to Title IX about that, or talked to the SAFER advocate about this? But I think, by and large, just knowing if somebody's choosing to go through an investigation, that's a very big deal. It takes a long time, and it's something that nobody enters into lightly. So knowing that they might be needing to talk about it for a couple of weeks or months or, a long time, and that there's going to be ups and downs, and it could be really difficult. And, so knowing as a friend or a loved one that can be challenging for you, encouraging or supporting your friend or loved one as they maybe get counseling, or you suggest that option, knowing that you also could get counseling as well for any vicarious trauma this might be bringing up for you, is a good thing. It's really hard to support someone when you're struggling as well, especially if it's bringing up any trauma that you've experienced. Another piece of it is that I would put out there too is just really trying to empower your friend or your loved one to make their own choices in the process. That it's they're the one going through it. They're the one who knows how that feels, and so they choose. If they want to go to counseling, if they want to continue with the investigation or seek a early resolution agreement, or if they want to report to law enforcement, or if they want to try to move residence halls, all of that is up to them. So it's just for you suggesting options, but not necessarily trying to tell them what to do. Because a big part of healing as a survivor is empowering yourself and finding your voice. And that involves making choices in terms of what you want to do. Feel free, Caitlin or Sarandon, to jump in with anything else that's coming up for you all.
I think that was really well said, Gillian. Thank you.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Caitlin said, that was really well said, and I agree with all of it. Thank you for stating that.
All right. So our sixth question is, do we expect there to be a new set of regulations based on the November presidential election? What would that look like for Cal Poly?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this one. I really wish that I had a crystal ball. I don't know if any of y'all have been feeling like that lately, but I would love to be able to know exactly what's going to happen and what to expect and what it would look like and so on and so forth. But the reality is that this is just simply the nature of things that are federally regulated. So the only true answer here is that we just don't know. I would expect a Biden Department of Education to look very different from a Trump Department of Education. But the fact remains that we can only speculate as to how so. So while we can only speculate, we can also keep in mind that these changes, it takes a lot of time for regulatory changes to go into effect. You can just, take a look at how long it took the Department of Education for this administration to put their regulations into effect, because as you may or may not know, the Title IX guidance from the Obama administration was rescinded in November of 2018, I believe, or gosh, it might have been 2017 actually. And we just got the final new regulations this August. So I think that just speaks to how long these things can really take. And so although I would not be able to speculate how it would look if we had a new president for the next 4 years, I would not put myself under any delusion that anything would change on, January 21st, if that makes sense. The short answer is it just depends and we don't know.
All right. Thanks, Caitlin. So our seventh question is, how does COVID-19 health regulations impact reporting and disclosing?
Yeah. Thanks for asking this. I think this is a very, what a timely question with the way that we're all trying to do our best with COVID and the restrictions and the rules, so to speak. So as some of y'all may or may not know, when we're doing a Title IX investigation, when someone has potentially been sexually assaulted, the last thing that we're really worried about is whether someone was drinking underage, if that makes sense. So for that reason, we need to provide immunity for folks who may have been breaking some rules, like drinking underage, while being harmed, like being sexually assaulted. So we offer that immunity because it's so important that we get as much information as possible and that we get like the facts. Do you know what I mean? So we're trying to decide exactly how much was consumed, what was consumed, and we don't want folks fretting about, a sanction for a drug or alcohol violation. So we offer immunity. In the same spirit as we offer that immunity, we offer this immunity from the COVID-19 health regulations and rules that have that Cal Poly's put in place to keep everyone safe and to try to navigate this pandemic responsibly. So we don't want folks to be worried about getting in trouble for violating a COVID regulation if they've been harmed and they need to access our services. So immunity is offered.
Just to add to that, when you come to SAFER, you are disclosing an experience, not reporting one. And so SAFER is not going to report you out or hold people responsible for breaking a student conduct policy, COVID related or otherwise. And we just want to remind people that this weekend is Halloween weekend, and it can be a very busy weekend for people, and it can have a lot of different actions that occur in it. So resources are still available to students regardless of their experiences with the COVID regulations, and we encourage everyone to reach out if they are in need of resources or any form of services.
All right, thank you both. So our next question is, what is an informal resolution and a full investigation? What is the difference and which one should I choose? Can the respondent decide to not participate in an informal resolution?
Awesome, good questions, like 3 questions in one. Okay, I'm gonna take a stab at it and I'll try to go in order, in the order in which it was asked. So an informal resolution, also known as an early resolution agreement. You might see it abbreviated as ERA. An early resolution agreement is an agreement which both parties voluntarily enter into. So that's like the first major piece of it. Both parties have to decide, okay, yeah, we want to explore an early resolution agreement. This is a type, informal resolutions tend to have more of a restorative justice flavor to them, in that the parties design the terms of the resolution together, not like sitting in the same room next to each other hammering out terms, but like we all collaborate to come up with terms that are acceptable to both parties. So just so you can have an idea of what some of the terms we've seen before look like, it's things like mandated education or training, mutual no contact orders, designated agreed upon times for certain common spaces like the library or like dining facilities, or whatever. Like those are just some examples of what the terms can look like. And the parties can decide to enter into an early resolution agreement at any time. So that could be at the very beginning when reports are filed, or it can be like all the way up until we're in the middle of the hearing and the parties decide, actually, you know what, I'd like to pursue an early resolution agreement. So that's just a quick and dirty on those. An investigation is a more lengthy process. It involves evidence gathering, speaking with witnesses if available, and ultimately, you know, depending on what the allegations are, it leads to a hearing, which we've talked a little bit about already. But yeah, I actually can't, I would never try to, it would violate my neutrality and my, you know, like status as a fact finder to say you should do an investigation or you should do an early resolution agreement. I can't do that. It's my job to make sure that the parties understand what their options are, and answer whatever questions they have about those options. So was that all 3 parts of the question? I hope so.
And I'll just chime in as well to say, same with Caitlin, you know, when somebody says, what should I choose? That's just not ever something that Title IX or that SAFER can tell you. We're just here to provide you with info and try to help you to process, but it's never our decision. We don't give advice at SAFER. We just give you support and try to help you figure out what's going to work best for you, but we won't tell you what to do. And then Caitlin, I think there was a question that came in the Q&A, more specific for this, that maybe Jennifer mentioned you might answer live.
Yeah, sure. It says, how do you make sure there isn't any explicit or implied coercion between the parties when it comes to early resolution agreements? That is a really good question. Obviously, we would never explicitly pressure someone. That would be like a major ethical violation, so we wouldn't do that. Now, in terms of like implied coercion, that suggests that it would be like an unconscious thing that we might, I don't know how a person, I wouldn't say that a person might not ever experience that, because of course you could feel like you were being coerced even if the person supposedly coercing you wasn't trying to coerce you. But all of that to say, that's why it's so valuable and important that the executive orders build in space for advisors and support persons in the process. So that's where, presumably an advocate might step in and like ask to have a sidebar with the person and say like, how are you feeling, and check in with them. And if it comes to light that they are feeling pressured, or they're misreading the situation, then maybe we need to backtrack a little bit and like answer some questions, or come at it from like a different posture. Basically my answer is that I think, we really rely on our on SAFER and on the folks who are helping shepherd folks through our process. It's really invaluable service. So yeah, but we would never intentionally pressure or coerce somebody.
All right, thank you all for answering that. So our next question is, can I decide to not go through with an investigation at any time?
Yes. Oh, sorry, I'll answer that. Yes, a person who files the complaint, who brings the complaint, can decide at any point that it's not for them, or it's not, that they'd like to walk away. And yeah, that's entirely within their right. Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So our 10th question is, can I report my perpetrator anonymously?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. So there are confidential reporting avenues that we've discussed already, and those are SAFER and counseling services. But Title IX is obligated to look into instances of sexual misconduct. So if a person is looking to anonymously like share their experience, they should access SAFER counseling services.
All right. And then our very last question for the night is, how do we learn more?
I can take this one. There are so many ways to learn more. You can, like, the easiest one is following SAFER on social media. We post a lot of really great infographics and a lot of really great information. And from there, you learn about our events, which you can attend and, learn even more. Along with that, you can take SAFER leadership training, which is a really in-depth training to help you learn a lot more about this topic. There's also a lot of websites you can look to. Know Your Nine is a really great one. It's pretty much written for college students because it's Title IX, but it summarizes things really nicely. Also on our SAFER social media, we have a great Title IX infographic that relates to Cal Poly and the CSU system. So there are so many ways to get involved and to learn more. But the easiest, and I think the best one to do right now virtually, would be to follow our social media, which I'm pretty sure is at Cal Poly SAFER. If you don't have an Instagram, we also have a Facebook, which is Cal Poly SAFER. And from there are so many different opportunities listed, not just within SAFER, but with our community partnerships like RISE. And beyond that, there are national things like Know Your Nine, and different people who are educating about these topics.
All right, thank you so much, Sarandon. So now I think we're just going to go into some closing words from both departments.
Thank you so much for being here and for giving us your attention. It just it really speaks to your role as leaders on your campus, and that curiosity, that desire to learn more and do more about something that's really important is super admirable. And I'm just really proud of everyone who's in attendance here. And please don't hesitate. I know that there are probably a ton of questions we didn't get to, but don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have more questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And I hope you all have a happy and fun and safe weekend.
And I'll just say thank you all so much as well. I know this is probably, the end of a long day with being on Zoom, and we're all having the burnout with that right now. So it just really means a lot to us that you would take this time in the evening to sit on the computer and listen to us again. Um, Please know we are here for you. This is of course a difficult process, and anytime somebody experiences gender or power-based violence, there's going to be a lot of trauma and healing work that needs to be done to process that trauma. And if reporting is the right avenue for you or for someone that you care about and you want to do that and you want some help, please know Safer is here for you confidentially. Rise is there for you as well, 24 hours a day. So just know that you don't have to do it alone ever. And we really hope that you seek us out, and we'll help you however we possibly can. And we really, truly care about you all. So thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me as a student on this panel, and allowing me to share my perspective of being engaged in this conversation as a student. I encourage you all to get involved in any way you can, and to reach out if you're ever in need of help, and to support your friends if they are ever in need of any form of help. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great Halloween, a very safe Halloween. Y'all are amazing for sitting here on a Thursday night.
All right. Thank you again to all of our panelists for answering all of those questions. And thank you all for attending and listening in tonight. We hope that you're able to leave this conversation with some clarity on the new Title IX regulations and what this means for students at Cal Poly. And just a reminder, this event was recorded and we'll be posting it on our various platforms in the coming weeks. So look out for that if you'd like to share it or review anything that we talked about tonight. But thank you all again and have a great night.